Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. PT Joe is unfortunately down for maintenance today, so we're going to be not doing a new deck. Instead, we're going to be looking at a tier list maker for Unbroken Bonds. This was posted in Burbank City by Mike Gibbs. Thank you for doing this. He also showed his own tier list of the cards he thought were great and bad and whatnot, and he ranked everything down here. And it was interesting to see, and he also, made it accessible to everyone to create their own tier lists and get the discussion rolling. So I'm basically going to try and use this video as like a sort of 1 week into Unbroken Bonds, like my thoughts into it, because obviously my set review is one thing, but when you actually start testing the archetypes and getting to play with the cards, you have a completely different opinion as to, the starts. So sort of like a 1 week on of Unbroken Bonds, I'll be discussing how I feel about these archetypes and these cards. So let's jump straight into it. I think I'll start with GX Pokemon because these are some of the most important ones. I'll start with the obvious poster boys of the set, Reshiram and Charizard. I'll keep things to this SS down to E tier list. I think that's probably just a reasonable way of doing it because, I'm basically saying if they're at the top, they're, incredibly strong cards that will be hugely impacting the game, and then, their impact will go all the way down to, like, having no impact, basically, in E. If it's an E, I basically expected to see no play whatsoever, so yeah, let's start going through the stuff, starting with the GXs. So Reshizard lives up to the hype. It's really, really strong. Very, very strong archetype. It can even beat like Zoro Dugong pretty convincingly without Slowking, which is very cool. And forcing them to have Slowking off Ditto is, pretty good for you as well. I've tried all the builds now. I've tried Greens, I've tried Jirachi, I've tried Salazzle. They're all strong. They're all strong. So I'm still not sure which is my favourite. But Reshizard is just good. The other thing that I want to put, the other GX I want to put in the very top tier is Dedenne. Dedenne works in the Reshizard builds that are not running Green Search, obviously. Also, it's good in Zoroark as like a one-of, and it also is at least a one-of in Pikarom. So that's some top tier threats right there. The Dedenne is good in those, and it's similar to Lele that you just like can think about putting it into other archetypes as well. I think just below the SS tier is going to be Persian. I think Persian is very good in Zoroark. I can see it easily going straight into Zoroark on its own. Its ability is very, very strong, and grabbing yourself like your next triple boost energy and your next like choice band Kukui combo, that sort of stuff is really, really good. So I like the Persian. I can foresee it taking over the most popular archetype of Zoroark, so I'm going to have to put it in the S tier. Some other tag teams, Gardevoir Sylveon, I only want to put in A tier. I think it has an inherently pretty weak Reshizard, which is the main thing that concerns me. Obviously, you have Fairy Charms. You can have some very reasonable matchups against Zoroark players. You can have, with Fairy Charms, obviously a reasonable matchup against Pikarom as well. So it's one of these sort of like pick your battles type decks. It may sort of go up and down in popularity based on how good other decks are performing. It's one that sort of has to lie in wait for the right meta to really take down tournaments. So I think Gardevoir Sylveon, its GX stack is still devastating and very, very strong. But it seems like there's less greens builds in our standard than there will be in the Japanese meta. And I think Gardevoir Sylveon was best at beating the green engines because they have no backup draw support at all. If we're still going to be seeing Jirachi builds of Reshizard, and we're still going to be seeing lots of Zoroark and Pikarom playing Jirachi as well, they can get out of a Magical Miracle reasonably easily. And its damage output just isn't amazing. So I'm going to keep Guardy just here right now. Where's Lucario Melmetal? I'm going to put this in A tier as well. Mill is still finding a way to work. Lieutenant Surge is really good. And does make Mill pretty strong. Mill has all sorts of options, be it like Araquanids and Heatrans to Vileplumes, obviously the Hooper stuff. Lucario Melmetal, when you're not against the fire decks, is insanely annoying to deal with, and it just pressurizes knockouts, and you actually take 6 prizes a good amount of the time, which is a faster win condition than physically decking out your opponent as well, so that's also very good for you to bear in mind. Yeah, good card. Mill is not dead, which is scary. Definitely something that people will try and keep working around, and I think it's going to be reasonable. Buzz Mosa. I haven't played this yet as a quad-based build. I'm super skeptical that that's ever going to be a thing. But as a potential one-of in Zap Beasts, I might have to put it in the A tier as well. Zap Beast is an interesting one. Gaining that Beast Gain GX just to cheese some easy prizes. If you Zapdos hit into something early, or if you just high roll your Beast Energy and can knock out a lower hit point basic, which, you know, Zapdos is the king of just gusting and taking cheap prizes. Being able to take your final 2 prizes on like a 60 hit point Pokemon is very, very silly. So I think that's a really reasonable card to have in the A tier, just because it could be going into Zap Beasts. So I think these 3 tag teams all find themselves in the A tier. I think next up, what do we got? We got Greninja Zora. I'm going to put this in the D tier. I think this is weak. I started testing it today. I even had a stream with it today for a little bit. It's very, very weak to Tapu Koko GX, which I can't see going anywhere. I still think Pikarom will be a relevant archetype. I still think Zapdos is a relevant archetype. So that's already very bad for you. You don't like seeing fighting stuff. Now, many of the Zoroark decks may be trimming down their fighting stuff, which is good news for you. Zap Beast will still play Buzzwole, so they can one-shot you with a Shrine Tick or with a Choice Band, whatever. They can still get over the line quite easily. You still don't like facing just non-GXs in general, so I think there's a lot to be desired left for the Greninja Zoroark. What I will say is its damage output is actually insane. It basically reminds me of Turbo Rayquaza, which claimed a couple of reasonable spots. I think 1 or 2 people made day 2 in the EUIC with a Turbo Rayquaza build, and this feels like Turbo Rayquaza. Just 2 energy attachments is really nice for you, and you have the 30 base damage, so it is reasonable damage output overall. But I think it belongs in the D tier, possibly the C tier. Oh, I'm going to push this to C tier. I'll push it to C, because I'm just looking at some of the other GXs that I want in the D tier, like the Celesteela and the Blastoise. I think they belong here. Celesteela is just one of those 70th cards. It doesn't feel like it's good enough to go into any deck, really. Its ability is good, denying GX attacks on certain turns. Its attack is a Y-Cyclone for 110, which is good on all colorless. It's just, you're weak to lightning, which is still relevant in my eyes, and your damage output's not all that strong, so I think it's just bang average. I think the Blastoise GX is a stage 2 that requires multiple other stage 2s to be in play, so you're inherently trying to high roll. At the same time, you physically need to have a high count of water energies in your deck, so not only are you multiple stage 2s trying to get online, you're also having to commit lots of space to blue energies, which don't do much in your deck at all, so your consistency is pretty low. So I think that's very poor. Is that all of our GXs? No, there's still Honchkrow and Whimsicott, which I'm going to pop into the B tier. Honchkrow is a really interesting one. I'm yet to be convinced by a combo Honchkrow build. I think combo Honchkrow may be one of these archetypes that we have to wait until Worlds because we get a reset stamp. I think currently trying to go for Lieutenant Surge Mars loops is not correct and not strong enough. But I think Honchkrow is still a reasonable card simply because there are going to be Zoroark builds very focused on Dugong and only play 1 or 2 or sometimes 0 basic energy cards, and Honchkrow being able to wall them out of that is horrible for them, and you can buy auto wins via this Honchkrow alone, which is very good for you. And its unfair GX attack is still strong when you're not a combo deck. You can play Judge in a Zoroark deck, like in the mid game, and go for an unfair GX and completely swing the tempo of the game as well. So I think Honchkrow will be reasonable in Zoroark, and the combo deck I don't think is good enough right now. I haven't seen a list that I've been convinced by, haven't played a list that's convinced me much either. So I think that's just one of those lying in wait type archetypes for the sort of Miss Magius combo plus reset stamp to really work. Whimsicott's an interesting one. I'm seeing a lot of it on the ladder. I'm beating it a good amount of times, but there are some matchups that you just can't beat it with. Having Fairy Charm ability is really annoying for Zoroark players. I've seen it with Porygon Z, which is interesting. I never thought that would be the case. But that seems to be one of the more popularized builds, actually, to ramp your damage output early and have more explosive responses when a Whimsicott is knocked out on a head flip or whatever. Obviously, Whimsicott is still very weak to Power Plant, and that's one reason why I can't really push it higher in the tier list, because it's pretty much countered by a Stadium card that's already thought about in a lot of different decks, just because it improves like Zoroark and shuts them down. So Whimsicott is obviously one of these like sort of fragile archetypes that will never do all that too well, because it's so reliant on its own ability, and a stage 2 if you're playing the Porygon, of course. So I think it's got a weak underbelly. I don't think it's ever going to be top tier, but it's definitely coming out in droves, and much more than I thought it would be. I originally rated this really poorly in the set review, and I think for the amount of experimentation it's already got, and the amount of people I imagine will be taking it to League Cups and Challenges at the very least, even if it's not regional events, makes me think this is going to be an archetype that just some people are playing. It's kind of like a boogeyman type of archetype that you sort of have to have in the back of your mind, and you don't want to face it if you're a certain deck or whatever, but it's one of those things that you'll only really expect to face it in a tournament like once or never. So, yeah. Let's look at some trainer cards. Energy Spinner was one of these cards that was actually never in our set review because it was a promo card. So we actually do get it in our English set, and I'm going to bump it all the way up to A. I think this is a very, very strong card. You get to search for an energy, but if you go second, you get to search for 3 energy cards. That 3 energy burst is really insane because it can really help you pop off if you're a Pikachu and Zekrom deck, if you're a Malamar deck, even if you're like a Darkrai deck, anything that wants to find lots of energies early and then start pitching them. This Energy Spin is a really good card, so I can see it adding into these builds. Also, it's searchable via Jirachi, so again, if you're playing Jirachi, again, like Malamar, Reshizard, you now have searchable energy. Obviously, Reshizard can also play Fiery Flint, of course, but this Energy Spinner seems reasonable. I'm going to put it in the A tier, just mainly for its potential alongside Malamar, but a few other things as well. What else have we got? We've got the Electromagnetic Radar. I'm going to put it into the A tier. Potentially S tier. I mean, it's kind of like a staple in Pika-ROM if you're playing the Turbo build. I think there will still be that split of sort of Jirachi, Gustavo-style build. But there will be some more Turbo-based builds using Dedenne to try and combo off and full blitz on turn 1. And then maybe finish off with that Let Loose, the sort of combo that turn 1 Pika-ROMs love to do so much. And Radar is influential in that, of course, because you can get your Dedenne and either Zeraora or Pika-ROM, and that's amazing for your combo in one card. So I think this will only ever be like a 2 or 3 of in Turbo ROM, but it's an influential card in that regard. So surprisingly, in the B tier, I'm going to put Secret Hood. Secret Hood's a card that's impressed me, actually. I really underestimated its versatility. Obviously, it's a card that's exactly a one-of in Unknown Hand decks to get around Alolan Muck. I've also seen some Orangaroos using this to get around Alolan Muck in some Granbull-based builds, which is very interesting. So, as a soft answer to Muck, it's pretty interesting. I don't think we're ever going to start seeing Jirachis using Stealthy Hood, but there's a few different cards that can definitely take advantage of this Stealthy Hood. And you can get around a few other things here and there as well. I've seen some quad GX based builds use it to get around the likes of Hoopers and lower Ninetales as well. So this Stealthy Hood's actually a reasonable card. So that surprised me. I think it's one that you kind of want to have in the binder. I think anything B and above is like, at least try and get it in the binder and whatnot. And then C and below is like, sure, if you want to, I guess you can go for these cards, but I wouldn't advise it. And I don't foresee them being all that strong. That's kind of what I would say. The Fairy Charms are strong. I guess I kind of have to put them in the same tier as Gardevoir. The thing is, Gardy has to play Choice Helmet in my eyes, so I might put these lower. Put them in the same tier as Whimsicott, because Whimsicott will definitely be playing these Fairy Charms. But it's kind of like this sort of B+, A- kind of category, because it's consideration with Gardevoir, but it's kind of a staple in Whimsicott. Also, the ability one is very good in Granbull. There's been a small resurgence in Granbull, thanks to the Stealthy Hood, plus the Fairy Charms, and also Red's Challenge has interestingly been developed into the new Red Bull-based builds of Granbull, which we're looking at, which is pretty interesting. So those are easily B tier. What are the trainers we're looking at? Janine is definitely going to go here. Koga is going to go here. I think these absolutely stink. They're not very good. Lieutenant Surge's Strategy, I'm going to put up the A tier, similar alongside this Lucario Melmetal. I think it's just very good in that. I haven't actually tried Zoro Control just yet. I think that might be the best place to put Surge, to be honest, because you can find all those supporters and make the most out of them and get yourself down to a zero-card deck so you can resource management back in the right supporters each time. So I'm going to put him at least an A, maybe higher if Zoro Control works. Pokegear we have to put at the very top. It's a consideration in so many decks for consistency, so yeah, it belongs there. Devo Spray sucks. Beast Bringer. How low do I put this? The thing is, Green Search makes this like the possible maybe in some of these Ultra Beast Space builds. I'm going to put it in D, not quite E tier. Metal Core Barrier, I'm also going to put in D, mainly for Tool Drop, potentially playing this to have tankier Doublades to win out some non-GX matchups. Ultra Forest Cart Envoy. I guess I'll put it in the same place as Beastbringer just because they have the same sort of utility. If you're one of these quad-based builds, you might maybe consider it sometimes a little. I'm going to put the Power Plant in the S tier. A very, very strong card for answering Persian, answering Zoroark, answering Dugongs, and not Dugongs, what's it called? Dedenes and Lele's and stuff. So early sort of denial, as well as good against Zoroark, just means it's a very good card consideration-wise. I've not fit it into all that many decks right now. Also good for Whimsicott, of course. So it's a matter of space and finding decks which want to play this over their own stadium cards right now. But overall, it's very, very strong. We've got the Boost Energy, the Triple Acceleration Energy. That's definitely at the top. It goes straight into Zoroark. Maybe you could put it down here alongside the Persian. I'm thinking Zoroark will still be a top competitor, though, until Worlds. So I'm going to put Boost at the top, just because it's also like a gateway card that opens up like Nidoqueen, Aerodactyl, Silvally, a few other things that want to take advantage of Boost Energy. Even like Gardevoir can look twice, even though I would never advise Stage 2s at the moment. The format is still very Let Loose focused, so I think it's still incorrect to go for Stage 2s for the most part. But yeah, the Boost Energy opens up a lot of doors for stuff like that. Green Search has to go on the top as well, I think, alongside the Pokegear. It's like a gateway supporter. Basically, every time you're building a deck, you're thinking, do I want to play this draw support Pokemon, or do I just want to go for a Greens build, and what's stronger? Basically, for every deck you build now, you have to have two builds. You have the build with 4 Pokegear and 4 green, and then you have the build with draw support in the background, and you have to weigh up which is stronger. If ever you're building any new archetype, always consider whether or not it's worth making a Greens build first. She is definitely insane. Really, really strong if you build around her correctly. The Chip Ice Axe, I think, is down here. I've tried the combo Honchkrow. I don't like it. I haven't found it to work, so I'm going to keep him down low. The fire stuff, I'm just going to go ahead and say, obviously, Reshizard is bananas. The Fire Crystal also works for the Salazzle hand deck, which is cool. It works for Reshizard, it works for Blounds. It's incredible. It's just that +1 value compared to an energy retrieval is so nuts when the deck... These fire decks are all about retaining and recycling fire energy, so it's absolutely nuts. Welder is as nuts as everyone predicted. Like, it's just so clearly incredible that it's just obvious, really. I'm going to put the Duskstone alongside the Honchkrow, keep it in this sort of category. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think Honchkrow is probably best in Zoroark, and it may not even be playing the Duskstone, but I think I'm going to be putting the Mismagius in the B tier as well. So I'm going to keep the Duskstone alongside those. Giovanni's Exile. Where do I put this card? Because I know that the other Giovanni stuff has absolutely flopped catastrophically poorly. I'm going to put it in C, I think. He's just a really versatile card for getting rid of the Dedenes and Lele's and stuff, which I think may be actually quite relevant. So I think just because he's one of these options for clearing off your bench space, it's actually really good. It's like a parallel to your own side, but then you can start rebenching instantly that turn, which is actually reasonable. So this may trump Nanu in Zoroark decks, and it's not limited to Zoroark decks. There's other decks that might be able to take advantage of it as well. So I'm going to put him in C, possibly a D tier kind of card. I'm going to put him in D. I'm going to be harsh. C is so far just a lone Greninja. Actually, we've got one that can go in C here. The Reds Challenge. Now, I'm skeptical about this Gramble archetype working. Obviously, the Reds Challenge is very cool for helping you instruct into combos. With that Reds Challenge, it effectively, if you have Pal Pad and Diantha and whatnot, you can have an infinite amount of Ultra Balls now, which was sometimes a worry in Gramble, where previously it would play things like Fiery Flint just to have extra, like, fake Ultra Balls. But I still think the sort of Red Bull archetype will only really play like 1 or 2 Reds maximum. The Stealthy Hoods are very cute. And stuff like Power Plant to even harder win Zoroark is pretty strong. I've not tested around the Gramble too much. It's kind of like word of mouth at the moment of how it's doing. But I think it belongs in the C tier. At the moment, just Gramble can really take advantage of this card. I can't see any other reason any other deck would use it right now. It feels weak. The Fighting Dojo is probably the lowest rating for one of the strongest cards in the set. Like, this card, Martial Arts Dojo, is actually nuts. Like, the card is so strong. 10 damage for stuff that has a fighting energy attached, and then 40 more if you're behind is bananas. but nothing can use it because it says no Ultra Beasts, and the only relevant fighting Pokemon is like a Lycanroc deck and a what's it called? A thingy deck that uses basic energy cards. So yeah, like the Hitmonchan deck, right? So nothing can really take advantage of the dojo right now. So I'm going to have to put it in D just because there's no home for this card. But as soon as we get good fighting support, this like leaps up into like huge relevancy. Like it becomes an insta-play in a deck as soon as it's got a home. So that's pretty interesting. So that just leaves our non-GX Pokemon. Kirim is this card that's seen so much hype and expectation. I've seen loads of people trying to build Quagnag Kirim, doing... what is it? It's like 110 and insta paralysis by discarding 2 energies. That's bad. Like, paralysis isn't even good right now because of Acerola and Guzma, and there are Jirachi decks that can make you get those. Pokegear makes every deck more consistent at finding Guzma out to paralysis as well, and 110 just isn't good numbers. It doesn't even, like, it one-bangs a Reshizard with Choice Band, so that's even more spaces going into a Quagnag that isn't Wishful Baton, and you're instantly giving up 2 energy every time you attack. That's really poor. Kirim is terrible. What else have we got? We got the Marshadow. Marshadow, I'm going to jump up to the S class, I think. I think it's a very strong tech card. I think Zoroark players are likely to play this. I think other Dark Week cards are going to play this to have answers to Buzzwole. And actually, I'm going to drop this to A, I think. It's only played in a handful of things, really. It's only really Zoroark and then like some other stuff that will play this, so I'll keep him down here for now. But as soon as Field Blower rotates, like he's our best friend, so we'll put him down here. Greninja's a stage 2 that's very slow. Katana is an Ultra Beast that I will consider in Zap Beasts as long as there's enough Lycanroc and as long as there's enough Absol as well, because it also has free retreat with a skateboard. So it may just be good enough as a pivot alongside that. I'm thinking that I want it up here. I think ultimately, though, the amount of Lycanroc that we're seeing is going to be a lot lower. I'm going to put him in the B tier. We'll put him in B. Hitmontop, I think it's slightly better than E tier. We'll put him by the dojo, I guess. I haven't tried the Hitmonchan-based build just yet, so my thoughts aren't too different about this one, but I've not seen anyone really like blowing up about it at all. Stack Attacker, I think this card is very poor. We'll put him down here. I don't think the stalling decks have the space to put this card in now that you're shoehorning in a few more DCs and Lucario, Melmetal, and a few other things. Even Surge takes up space. So I don't think the deck necessarily has space for the Stack Attacker. Incineroar's a stage 2. We don't care about that because of Let Loose. What's it called? Salazzle comes all the way up to S tier. It's a definite maybe in all the fire decks. It's the face of unknown hand. And yeah, I think it's a very strong card, to be honest. It's similar to like Green Search. You're like, if I'm a fire deck, would I rather this or this? And having those options is really insane. So Salazzle is still a fantastic draw engine, and it might be the better build of Baby Clowns, actually. I know this card's been hated on a lot, the Baby Clown, the one that I'm going to rate next. Because some people initially testing this archetype thinking it's the absolute stone cold nuts. Now I think it's just clunky garbage that loses to Let Loose instantly. So some Salazzle builds may be the correct way to go with Blacephalon in future. And I'm still going to put Blacephalon in the B tier. He's a non-GX that hits ridiculous numbers. Like, that's as simple as that. I know a lot of people are saying, lol, it loses to Let Loose, it loses to this, that, and the other, it loses to Field Blower, it loses to Lysander Labs, all that stuff. Like, sure, but who's actually playing Lysander Labs? How many decks have the space for Field Blower? Oftentimes, like, you can still, like, B-string onto your guy, or you can still welder onto your guy and still do reasonable damage, and you have this buffer of being a non-GX as well, that you only need to take big swing knockouts. Like, you don't even need to chain knockouts if you're up against a if you're up against a GX deck. You can sort of, like, fill your board and build towards big knockouts when you have to. So I think Blacephalon's still very strong. I think it needs to be reworked. I think our perception of this card was warped by a Japanese metagame, which is very different to how the game is shaping up now that Unbroken Bonds is legal out for everyone else. I think there was a lot of quad Ultra Beast decks which were prevalent in Japan, which is going to be less likely the case, I want to say, in our meta, and that made Blowns be able to win in like 2 turns, 2 or 3 turns against some tag teams. So it really gave us a warped perception, but I think Overall, I overrated this card initially, but I still think he's easily worth building around, and is not an archetype that just fades out of relevancy. I see it, as relevant as Whimsicott right now, pretty much, and it still has a lot going for it. Gengar is much weaker than Weezing. Weezing, however, is really impressed me. I'm going to jump Weezing up to A tier. I think he's worth that. He's very, very strong. Very scary card, actually. In combination with Shrine, your damage counters go wild. And as I mentioned, there are people using Dedenne and Lele to Kiawe onto their Reshizard turn 1, so the Weezing starts getting a hell of value when you start spreading. And if there are less quad-based builds, this Weezing gets very, very strong. So I really like the power of Weezing overall. I'm going to put the Mewtwo in the B category. At the moment, I haven't used it all that much. Potentially pushed down to a C even. But I'm not seeing much muck in Zoroark. It feels like a lot of the Zoroark players are dropping down from the 1-1 plus Ditto down to maybe just Ditto muck now. And that opens the door for Mewtwo to be a nice treasurable means of getting a supporter back on top of your deck, which is a really good deal because it's a slow versus Seeker and you can have synergy with a couple cards like Salazzle and Zoroark and stuff like that to get it to work. So I'm going to keep this in the B tier. I think it's a very reasonable card still. Mew jumps all the way up to S. Mew is actually one of the most nuts cards in this set, to be honest. Not only is his bench barrier integral for protecting against Dugong and Pikarom, his damage counter placements turn out to be some absolutely nutty stuff. You can set up knockouts to get around batons, set up knockouts to get around all sorts of different things. Keeping a non-GX in the active is really annoying for Reshizard, especially if they need to be using welders to reattach to their guys. And Mew is very good in Reshizard mirror matches because you can set up both Reshizards at once to knock them out with a choice band from then on with Flare Strikes. So this Mew is an insane card. Really, really insane. Not only great for denying bench damage, but his attack is relevant. That colorless attack is actually really, really big. I'm going to put the Mismagius over in B tier. Like I said, the quad build of Mosa doesn't work. The quad build of Gardevoir Sylveon is fine. The Mismagius is pretty reasonable in there. The combo Honchkrow isn't working right now for me. So there's only really a couple. Like, it's only really Gardevoir that it really lives in right now. When Reset Stamp comes out, maybe it's a different story. Right now, Mismagius is probably just a B in my eyes. Maybe even lower, to be honest. It may be a C tier card. But obviously we get a fresh coat of paint and look at it with a fresh pair of eyes. As soon as Reset Stamp comes out, it becomes much more viable. So actually I'm going to drop this down to C tier, I think. It's probably not good enough in anything but exactly Guardy. Okay, fine. Just because Guardy's here, we'll keep Mismagius in touching distance of Guardy. Just because Guardy's like the only deck that can really take advantage of it right now. I can't see it in anything else being that good. The Giovanni's Mill stuff, for me, completely stinks. I tried it. It was one of the first decks I wanted to try in the new format, and it was very disappointing. Very, very sad that it was so far away from being good. I should have sort of had this forewarned before. I mean, we've had the Garchomp Lucario deck, which was able to use Lucario to search any card every single turn, and your big payoff was using a Cynthia, which was one of the best supporters in our format. And this is using a Giovanni's, which is not one of the best supporters in our format. It's not drawing us any cards. It's not a consistency option. It's doing nothing for us. So that really does spell trouble for this deck. I think it's absolutely abysmal, to be honest. The Landorus is very poor. It doesn't do enough compared to other fighting tools. Crabominable is going to stay alone. It's not very good at all. Spiritomb. I've seen Shintaro playing it in his Umbreon Hooper deck as a sort of late beat stick. I think that's the only home I see the Spiritomb. I personally don't think the Stunfisk is ever going to do anything. So for exactly Shintaro's build, the Hooper Umbreon deck as a late beat stick, we'll put him here. But that's it. For Porygon, I think I want to put him in A tier. It's a stage 2, so I'm already very skeptical. But Whimsicott has Toy Box. We have Greens, and we have Jirachi. I want to put this... I think I want to put it in B. Possibly A, though. I'm going to keep it in B tier for now, just because I'm so cynical about stage 2s in this meta that is going to be using Zapdos, Pikarom, and Reshizard that all want to try and let loose on turn 1. That's like what I've experienced from the top tier archetypes. So I'm very concerned about the top tier decks. So Porygon is going to stay here. Obviously, it's an option with Whimsicott. Obviously, there's that sort of tag team box deck, kind of memey, kind of more fun stuff. So I'm going to keep Porygon in B. Snorlax is here for the artwork, I assume, because it's useless. Dugong jumps up here because basically alongside Persian, because it's a big contender in Zoroark. They basically paint the new face of Zoroark a lot of the time, so I think that's very good. And the last card is Volcanion. Is Volcanion going to jump all the way to A, or is it going to stay in B? This is really based on how I feel Reshizard is going to go, and I think a lot of the time people are looking towards the Miltank Jirachi build just because it has a better Zapdos. So I'm going to keep the Volcanion in B. I think the Green Search build is overall less popular than the other Jirachi-based builds of Reshiram Charizard, so I'm going to keep Volcanion in B. It's one of those cards that I didn't look at twice when the set review was first announced. I was like, wow, this is terrible, but it shows you the power of Green Search, that you can think about having these subpar cards into your deck just to have a huge upswing of having a greens in your build. So I'm going to keep Volcanion down here as a potential maybe in Reshizard, but not guaranteed, and probably not the strongest build of Reshizard in my opinion. The Green Search is fine, but I don't think it's all that strong. So that is going to be my tier list, guys. Hope you did enjoy. Where would you do this? You can obviously try this out yourselves and see how it goes for you. But yeah, it was really interesting, and thanks to Mike for putting this available to everyone to do this tier list. And I thought it was a good chance to have like a sort of 1 week on my sort of Unbroken Bonds thoughts and what's changed already from what I've tested with and what I haven't. Obviously, there's still a lot to uncover, and I'm sure there's a lot of testing that will sort of come to the limelight, and we'll see how things adapt as they do. So still, this isn't set in stone, but this is kind of like my latest impressions of Unbroken Bonds. So hope you enjoy, guys. Hopefully PTC Joe's back up soon, and I'll be able to do some more recording of new decks. So yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, and cheers.